Welcome back to the Intentional Apostolic Podcast. I'm Elissa Hornbeck, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about being apostolic, being intentional, and being intentionally apostolic as young ladies and as saints. Now, before we get into this episode, I need to confess something to you. I struggle a lot with procrastination, and those of you who know me and know me well, this really isn't a surprise to you, but for everybody else that's listening, yes, procrastination, consistency, these are things that naturally just do not come easy to me. Consistency is something that I've had to work on over and over and over again over the years, and that, among other things, is the subject of this podcast episode today. So today we're going to be talking about embracing the imperfections. And while most of us, kind of have the idea or have heard somebody, mention that it's okay not to be perfect. None of us are perfect. We're all human. All of that sort of stuff. Even though we've heard it said, the majority of us, I don't think we really fully believe that. There's still this innate sense within us that we want to be perfect. We want to, have everything just right and, achieve this, impossible standard for ourselves. And the reality is that's not really possible because we are human. We do make mistakes, and, we're never going to fully achieve what we attain, what we're aiming for, until we reach heaven. But that being said, that means that there's two things we need to do. The first is we have to be at peace with the fact that we won't be perfect this side of heaven. And the second thing is, with fully understanding that, grasping it, and, taking that into ourselves, we also have to have a keen awareness not to allow ourselves to become complacent with that knowledge. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the practical side of things. One thing that I've noticed about people, myself included, that struggle with this procrastination, perfectionism type stuff is that perfectionism and procrastination a lot of times manifests itself in this kind of analysis paralysis where you don't do something until you have it all 100% right or almost there. And the truth of the matter is that really, really hinders us from doing not only what God has called us to do, but just what we need to be able to do in our day-to-day natural lives. And that's not to say that, I don't want to have things the best that they can be. I believe in excellence and professionalism. There's no doubt about that. I 100% believe that you should strive to have the best results as possible in whatever you're doing, whether that's homemaking, whether that's preparing a sermon, whether that's ministering, teaching Bible studies, doing bake sales, whatever that is, or, creating content online. I believe that you should strive to, do things in a spirit of excellence and do things as professionally as you can. And with that being said, I also believe that you should spend the time and resources to properly invest not only in yourself, but, make sure that you have the tools and resources and stuff that you need. That way you can be as professional and excellent as possible. But with all of that being said, we cannot allow the excuse of not having or being yet to hinder us from going ahead and doing what God called us to do. Just because you don't have X, Y, Z doesn't mean that you can't go ahead and do what God asked you to do. For example, I've taken a lot of the content that I create away from the studio space that I have, just because I'm so busy and it's not practical for me to be in the studio when I'm at the prime for creating content. And more specifically, even this podcast right now, I'm recording it in my car, which is away from the norm of how I normally do things with the whole podcast setup. But I am intentionally choosing to choose done over ideal. I want to say that again. Choose done over ideal. And that's so hard to do, especially when you so desperately want to control the outcome. You want to control every little thing. But here's the deal. God asks for us to be obedient, not perfect. And I want to do a whole lesson on obedience because it's a deep dive. And I think we all need to have a proper understanding of obedience because there's a lot of stigma around it. And some of it stems from, our flesh not wanting to be in submission to God. But there's a lot of blessing and protection that comes with obedience. Now, back to the subject of perfectionism and getting things done. A lot of times we want so badly to have this, specific idealistic outcome that we've created in our head that we get so focused on that ideal outcome that we don't even start. Or if we do start, we don't really get that far into actually doing the thing that we're striving to do, or that we say that we're striving to do. And that hinders us from making progress to that endpoint. So let's say, for example, you wanted to create a podcast and you have this idea of how the podcast you want it to be. You want all the, perfect music intros and all the sound effects and the studio space, and you want to do video and everything. But you don't do anything to create the studio. You're not making notes. You're not setting aside time to record episodes. You're not doing all the things that are necessary because, you have this idealistic picture in your head that you're just going to have a free schedule and, you can go in there and spend 6 hours and do that and do all your editing. But the reality is you have 30 minutes free here and 30 minutes free there. And so the realistic approach is to take that 30 minutes. One day you can script all your notes, and then another day you can set aside and record. And I understand that sometimes there are things that you do need to wait because there are key ingredients that you really, really need. And, it's not procrastination. It really is a legitimate thing. But I would venture to say that the majority of things that we procrastinate on, it really isn't a valid reason that we're procrastinating. It's just our inability to commit and go ahead and follow through with it. So if you have something that you're procrastinating on, let this be your word, your message that you need to get that done. And even the Bible talks about this. Romans 12 verses 1-3 says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, and this applies to sisters too, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. For I say, though the grace be given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think more soberly according as God hath dealt every man the measure of faith. Now, I want to focus in on something that verse 2 says. It talks about what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And the answer to what is the good, perfect, and acceptable will of God is one, that you are transformed by the renewing of your mind, and that you are proving that, and that you are presenting your body. That means all of you, your mind, soul, spirit, all of you, which includes your actions and your obedience, as a living sacrifice to God. That means that you are following through with what God called you to do, and that you are doing what He created you to do. I know procrastination is so easy to fall into. And this analysis paralysis, if you have ADHD or any of those other number of things, I understand that it is a very, very real challenge to get all the things done. And you have this long laundry list of ministry items and real life items and dreams and plans and goals. But if you know that you have all of these things that you need to get done, and you're struggling to get all of them done, there's a couple of things that you need to be doing. One, you need to be able to prioritize what's actually important and what is just kind of a want, or like that would be nice, or even be able to prioritize, these are important things, but I need to focus somewhere else right now. I have things that I feel called and led to do, but the reality is I can't do 16 big projects at once. I have to focus on 2 or 3 things, get those done, get those finished. And then I'm going to have the freedom, both of my time, my mental energy, my focus, to be able to go and do the other things with excellence. Sometimes I think we really take too much on ourselves because we can't really focus, and we struggle to say no to good things, necessary things, or to even say, not yet, not right now. And so we try to split our focus, a gazillion different ways, and then we get nothing done when we would have been better off, saying, okay, these are the 3 things I'm going to focus on this week or this month or this quarter. I'm going to do X, I'm going to do Y, and I'm going to do Z. And that's it. I'm going to take care of my personal responsibilities and my spiritual walk. But beyond that, I'm not going to say yes to things that take me away from what God called me to do and what I need to be focusing on right now. Just because it's good and just because it's necessary doesn't always mean that you are the person that is supposed to be doing that right now. There is so much wisdom in being able to delegate and to hand things off to other people. And yes, this will force you to let go of your need to control every single detail. And, sometimes I think this procrastination, decision, analysis paralysis, and all of this goes hand in hand with, this controlling nature that because we struggle so much, we want to hold on to everything so tightly when God never intended for us to hold so tightly that the dream never blooms and it never, gets into existence because we held on to it so tightly, so afraid that, we're going to drop it and that we're going to lose it. When, that was meant to either be put on a list to focus, put on a list for later, or delegated to somebody else. And here's the deal. Opportunities are created. All of us that are in ministry now, we're there because somebody chose to trust us and, relinquish control to us and give us a seat at the table, give us responsibility. And so if you're in ministry and you're in leadership now it's your turn to start trusting other people and start developing and pouring into other people. And that means to let go of some of the control over the things that you have and put it into their hands, to let them, hold some of the responsibility and the weight of that. And that frees you up to focus even more on the things that you really ought to be doing. And those of us that are in ministry and leadership, it is our responsibility to be training up the next generation, to be pouring into the next leaders, the next ministry. And that means letting go. That means pouring into them. And that means, handing off some of the responsibility. Ministry was never meant to be a do it by yourself. It was always meant to be a teamwork thing, a thing that was done together. And you're going to struggle so much with burnout and honestly, probably a lot of other things if you have too much on your plate, if you are not delegating or saying no to all the things that you should be delegating or saying no to. And yes, we got to embrace the imperfections because none of us are perfect. And we got to get things done. But that getting things done is done through delegation and focus. I do want to say that if this episode is not for you and you have it all under control and you're doing an amazing job delegating, then kudos to you. That's awesome. That's fabulous. Keep it up. But for those of us who we struggle a little bit more with this, and this is an area that where you need to grow or we are growing in, I want to encourage you to keep it up. Stay with it. When you fail, get back up and try again. Just because, you failed at it and it didn't 100% work out the way you thought it would, that's just all the more proof that you got to get up and keep trying again. It does get better. I promise you that it does get better, but it won't get better until you start putting it into practice. Your life is not going to free up until you actually start saying no, until you start delegating, until you start following through with actually focusing on what you need to be focusing on. So get up, be intentional, actually choose and follow through with what's truly, truly important to you. God's going to help you. God's going to be your strength. But you got to choose. You got to choose it.
Well, thanks so much for listening. It is my goal to get more high-value, intentional content out into all of your hands and ears. So, thank you for spending your precious time. Thank you to all of you amazing saints and sisters. And if this has helped you, if this has encouraged you, if this has, impacted you in any way, please feel free to share with a friend and leave a like, a review, wherever you listen, all the amazing podcast things. And until next time, stay intentional, y'all.